Welcome to another Aurora Generator podcast. Today, we're diving into something that can feel pretty complex when you're setting up a generator, the wiring. Specifically, we're going to look at DynaGen wiring harnesses and, their accessories. Our goal here is really to unpack why using these pre-made options might be such a big help, especially if you want to make the whole process simpler, maybe avoid getting tangled up in tricky connections.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the traditional way of doing generator wiring. It's a very manual job, right? You've got all these individual wires,
Yeah.
you're cutting them, crimping terminals onto them, and then you have to label every single one meticulously so you know what connects where.
Okay, yeah, let's dig into that a bit because it's not just the time it takes to do all that fiddly work, is it? What are some of the real headaches if you try wiring from scratch?
Well, the big one is just the potential for mistakes. It's pretty high. Imagine you accidentally swap a couple of wires, or maybe a terminal isn't crimped on quite right. Down the road, that could cause, well, anything from small glitches to actually damaging components. And honestly, trying to follow those detailed wiring diagrams, that can be really intimidating if it's not something you do every day.
Right, that makes sense. So DynaGen offers something different here. What's their approach?
Yeah, exactly. That's where their pre-made wiring harnesses come into play. You can think of it more like a pre-built wiring solution. So instead of messing with every single wire, you get this complete harness. It's already designed to work perfectly with your DynaGen controller, and often it's even specific to certain engine models.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The time saving, that's kind of obvious, right? You skip all the cutting and crimping.
Yeah.
But what else? Are there other, maybe less obvious benefits?
Oh, definitely. A really big one is just the boost in reliability. See these harnesses? They're put together in a factory. They're tested thoroughly. Every connection is made using, precision tools, and the whole thing gets checked for stuff like continuity, making sure the electrical path is solid and that everything's wired exactly right. This cuts way down on the chance of making those frustrating, sometimes expensive, wiring errors. For someone who's maybe not an electrical whiz, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of reading those complicated diagrams, like a common mistake, reversing polarity. That can fry sensitive electronics. Pre-made harnesses are usually designed with connectors that only fit one way, so you physically can't plug it in wrong.
Ah, okay. That makes a ton of sense. It's almost like the expertise is built right into the harness itself. Sounds like it would be super helpful for anyone who feels a bit, nervous about tackling generator wiring. Is it pretty much plug and play then?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Plug and play is largely the idea. And that ease of use, that's a major selling point,
Yes.
especially for folks who don't have maybe a deep background in engine electrics. These harnesses are meant to cut down on the need for special tools or really in-depth know-how. Often the connectors are keyed or unique shapes, so they literally only plug into the right spot. Takes the guesswork right out.
Gotcha. Now, it's not just the harnesses themselves, right? DynaGen also has accessories that seem to fit into this whole simplified system. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Yes, absolutely. The accessories are pretty key to getting the full benefit while still keeping the wiring simple. Good examples are things like oil pressure sensors. These are really vital. They let the DynaGen controller keep an eye on the engine's oil pressure constantly, which, is a basic indicator of how healthy the engine is.
Okay, so that's critical info. But if you weren't using one of these pre-made harnesses, how would you normally hook up a sensor like that?
Right, well, you'd have to find the right sensor first. Then you'd need to figure out the exact wiring needed, how to connect it to the sensor itself, and then how to run those wires to the correct input points on the controller. That means digging into wiring diagrams, making sure you have the right little connectors, knowing how to wire them up. But with DynaGen's pre-made harnesses, very often the connections you need for that oil pressure sensor, they're already built right in. You just plug the sensor into its spot on the harness, and boom, the connection back to the controller is already done.
Wow. Okay. That sounds incredibly smooth. What about other important engine checks, like temperature?
Yep, coolant temperature is another big one. Just like oil pressure, you really need to know the engine's coolant temp to avoid overheating, which can cause serious damage. So DynaGen offers coolant temperature sensors too. And just like the oil pressure sensors, the pre-made harnesses very often include the right connectors, all ready to go, for these temperature sensors as well.
So it's basically a consistent philosophy then. The harnesses anticipate you needing these key sensors, and they just make adding them really, really straightforward.
Exactly right. It's designed as a system. So when you pair up the DynaGen controllers with their harnesses and these kinds of accessories, The oil pressure, the temp sensors, you get that crucial engine monitoring, but with way less wiring hassle. Everything's really meant to just work together smoothly.
And the controllers themselves, the DynaGen controllers, they're built to talk to these harnesses and sensors without any fuss.
Absolutely, yeah. They're designed for seamless integration. If you look in the user manuals for the different DynaGen controllers, the 200 ES52, the TE series like 350 and 410, the TG series, 350, 410, even the Pro 600, they all have detailed wiring info. And it specifically shows how to connect these sensors using the pre-made harnesses. The manuals also explain the different kinds of sensor inputs the controllers can handle. For instance, some sensors work off resistance changes, low or high. Some inputs might be universal. They can read resistance or voltage or current signals. And then you have things like magnetic pickups, often used for engine speed, which work differently again. The controllers are smart enough to understand the signals coming through those dedicated harness connections.
Okay, so let's try and boil this all down. For someone who's setting up a generator, what are the main takeaways here? What are the big pluses of using the DynaGen pre-made stuff?
Yeah, summarizing it, I'd say there are a few key benefits. First, installation is just way simpler and faster. You're spending much less time messing with individual wires. Second, reliability goes up. Because they're factory made and tested, you drastically cut down the chances of wiring mistakes. That saves you potential headaches and troubleshooting time later. So overall system reliability is better. Third, it makes the whole thing more accessible, especially if you're not super comfortable with complex engine wiring. And finally, you get that really smooth integration with the DynaGen controllers, which makes connecting and using those vital monitoring sensors, oil pressure, coolant temp, really straightforward.
Right. So wrapping this up, it really sounds like DynaGen put a lot of thought into making generator setup much more user-friendly, more efficient too,
Yeah.
particularly around connecting those absolutely critical engine monitoring bits.
That's a perfect summary, yeah. They've essentially taken a potentially tricky, error-prone part of the job and offered a solution that's just much more manageable and ultimately more reliable.
Well, this has been genuinely illuminating, really digging into these DynaGen harnesses and accessories. It makes you think, considering the time you save, the mistakes you avoid, and how easy it makes hooking up those key sensors. Could choosing these pre-made harnesses and accessories actually be the most valuable first step you take towards ensuring your generator runs reliably? Definitely something to ponder. Thanks so much for sharing all that insight today.